Hello students, and welcome to the last topic in your course, Educational Concepts and Terminology. Well, this topic is not going to be similar to your last topics because this is not about BTC competencies, but this is about what is BTC's role in Bahrain's education reform project. Let's have a quick look at the contents of this video lecture. In this video lesson, we are going to go over a few of these topics listed over here. We will refer to the recent UOB ranking. We'll refer to Bahrain's education reform project. We will talk about BQA, that is Bahrain Quality Assurance, and what is its role, what does it do. We will briefly discuss two of the schools review conducted by BQA. We will also talk about BTC and its role in Bahrain's education reform. Towards the end of this video lecture, there is a short quiz, which is to test how much you understood in this video lecture. I suggest you do the quiz before checking the answers, which are there on the last slide of this presentation. So what do we mean by recent UOB ranking? Well, this simply means that in the world ranking, UOB stood first in Bahrain, which means 213th in the world. And it also ranked top in the 5%, that is 411 out of 25,000 world universities in terms of employer reputation. In other words, it means that as an employer, UOB stands among top 5% in the world. Well, these are just to give you an idea of ranking, which means just like we assess you as our students, even the universities and schools are assessed by certain bodies and certain organizations so that they do a good job and they stand, a good rank when compared to the other universities, other colleges across the world. Bahrain Education Reform Project was established in 2005, and this project is a part of Bahrain's Vision 2030, and it's also a very important part of Bahrain's economic development plan. Now, what does this mean in simple words? In simple words, this means every country needs to develop economically, and every economic development is also based on the educational reforms of the same country. So if Bahrain has to develop economically, it has to have a strong educational program. And this is supported by the role of Bahrain Quality Assurance. So let's see what is the role of Bahrain Quality Assurance. Bahrain Quality Assurance, or in short as called BQA, was formed in 2008. It conducts national school exams and it ensures high quality standards in education in Bahrain. It is supposed to review all private and public schools, colleges, universities, vocational colleges, all kind of institutes, educational institutes. And after doing the review, it publishes annual reports. These reviews, usually they go over a period of 2 to 3 years, and after every 3 or 4 years, a report is published to share what is the result of these reviews. Now we have a look at two of the reviews conducted by BQA in their annual report, which was published last year. Let's have a look at one of the reviews. Now, just before we discuss this, let me quickly give you an idea of what is this that you have in front of you. Well, this is, of course, a graph, and we call a graph a figure. And in your research, whenever you present the research information, you present it in a graph so that it is easily understood by everyone. Every graph has to have a number, which you can see over here. It has a number, it's called figure 2. Every graph has to have a title, and a title is can be in just one word, few words, or as you see over here, it can also be as long as stated over here. Then the graph has bars. If it's a bar graph, the graph is also supposed to have a legend which tells you the color codes and what do these color codes stand for. And as usual, the graph has an X and Y axis. Now in this graph, we see three categories of schools which are represented. We have the primary schools, which are 38 in number. We have intermediate schools, which are 17 in number. And we have secondary schools, which are 9 in number. Now, what color do you see most in this graph? Yes, we see the red color, which is, most obvious in all the four colors which are there in this graph. Unfortunately, the red color represents the inadequateness of the schools. And so, if you can see in the legend here, the red color represents how many schools are inadequate, which means they do not satisfy the criteria of quality which is established by the BQA. And if you compare the three kinds of schools over here, the intermediate schools have more inadequate schools compared to the primary or secondary schools. So BQA basically grades the schools in terms of four categories or four standards, which is outstanding, good, satisfactory, and inadequate. So if you look at the graph, can you tell me which of the schools does not have any outstanding school in their category? Yes, it's the intermediate schools. So unfortunately, there are no outstanding intermediate schools. Again, if you look at the graph, could you tell me which schools are more satisfactory compared to the others? Yes, primary schools are more satisfactory than the intermediate or secondary schools. Alright, my next question. Which schools have the least amount of percentage in terms of being good? Yes, unfortunately again it's the intermediate schools which have the least amount of schools categorized as good, which is only 12%, whereas 26% of primary schools are graded as good, 22% of secondary schools are graded as good, but only 12% of intermediate schools are graded as good. So this is how you should be familiar with the graph, and as you can see over here, this gives you when the results were declared. So this is the graphic information from the reviews which were conducted in the year 2017 to 2018, and this is the third cycle of educational reviews which is stated through this cycle 3 over here, and the total schools in this review were 64 in number. And if you calculate and you count all these circles, you will have the number of total number of schools. So it's not very difficult. The graphs are very easy to understand. You just need to focus and give your attention to understand how the data is represented. Let's take a look at the next graph. Now again, this is figure 3, and this is the title of the graph. Again, we have 64 total schools. This is the third cycle of reviews which was done in 2017 to 18, which is last year. And this graph is different from the last graph because it does not show you the schools in terms of secondary, primary or intermediate, but it shows you all the schools together combined, representing total number of inadequate schools, total number of satisfactory, total good and total outstanding schools. So from 64 schools, how many schools are inadequate? Can you see? Yes, 23 schools are inadequate. Can we say the schools which are outstanding and the schools which are satisfactory are equal in number? Yes, because both of them have 20% in their categories. So there are 20% schools which are outstanding and 20% of the 64 schools which are satisfactory. And we have 15 schools out of 64 which are graded as good. So this is how you will understand the graph, and in your exams you could have questions asking you to identify as true or false the information which is there in the graph. Alright, let's go ahead to the last slide in this video lesson, and this slide talks about what is BTC's role in Bahrain's education. Well, as you know, the most important factor in BTC is teaching practice, which means that whatever you study, whatever you learn over here, you have to apply, you have to use it, and for this purpose you have the teaching practice, which means you go to schools and you do your lessons, take your lessons over there. Also, in a college, the college teachers guide you to plan and prepare your lessons so that you can do a good job when you go to school to teach your lessons. And you start your teaching from year 2 to 4, because in year 1 you do start TP, but you only do the observations of competencies that you will see in the teachers who will be teaching in your classes. And from year 2 to 4, you will practice the competencies that you will be learning in doing your own teaching practice. Well, BTC adheres, that means BTC uses the BQA guidelines to focus on quality in teaching all programs, which also means that in your college, the BTC does not offer just the BEd course, which is a Bachelor's in Education, but BTC also offers 3 other courses, which are Postgraduate Diploma in Education and Educational Leadership Program, and also Continuous Professional Development. So this is just a brief, lesson on the last reading. I hope you have understood what the reading is about. I suggest you go over the video a couple of times and try to do some of the graphs which are there in the BQA annual report, which is online. The link is given to you at the end of your reading 8, the last link. So please go ahead, do some of the graphs for practice, because we are going to use a graph like those in your final exam. And now I will end this lesson and leave you to do the quiz on your own, and then you can, after you finish the quiz, you can check the answers in the last slide. Alright, I hope you understood this lesson. Thank you and good luck to you.